The galaxy had known peace for so long that many of its children had forgotten what war smelled like. For millennia, starfaring civilizations drifted between suns in patient commerce, in careful treaties, in the cautious sharing of art and mathematics. The long-remembered wars of ancient cycles were treated as cautionary tales, retold in epic song, but never imagined as things that might return. Peace was taken not as a blessing, but as a law, as though the stars themselves had sworn an oath that blood would never again stain their light. That oath was broken on a day without warning. The invasion did not begin at the borders of the familiar. It did not rise from a hostile neighbor or some forgotten rival brooding in darkened nebulae. It came from beyond, from a river of black between galaxies. Ships that were not ships tore into reality, shapes that twisted perception and defied description, and behind them poured legions of fire. Planets that had not known violence in 100 generations were scourged to ash in hours. Moons cracked like glass. Cities that had built towers higher than their clouds vanished in columns of molten light. These were not raiders or conquerors. They were eradicators. The ancient councils of the galaxy gathered, sending pleas and envoys in every direction, but words meant nothing to the invaders. Their response to entreaty was silence. Their answer to gifts was fire. They spoke no language, offered no warning, demanded no tribute. They destroyed because it was in them to destroy, because their hunger was boundless and their mercy absent. At first, the great powers of the galaxy sought to resist alone. The Vayari, whose ships were living creatures of crystal and bone, launched entire armadas only to watch their fleets devoured by torrents of shadow. The Tiran, whose machines were so perfect they seemed to sing with thought, unleashed engines of annihilation that once might have been the terror of all creation. The invaders tore them apart with contemptuous ease. One by one, defenses faltered. One by one, star systems went dark. It was not long before whispers spread in hidden chambers, and those whispers carried a single, desperate name: humanity. The humans were not the oldest of the starfaring peoples. They were not the wisest, nor the most beautiful, nor the most technologically accomplished. Their homeworld was a young world, only newly risen to the great map of civilizations. For centuries they had been regarded with a mixture of fascination and suspicion, reckless, impatient, too willing to risk, too unwilling to kneel. And yet, in every history kept among the stars, there was the memory of what humans had done in their short time. They had split the atom and chained it to ships that burned a path through the void. They had tamed storms and deserts and learned to drink air from poisoned skies. They had fought wars so terrible that entire continents trembled, and yet from the ruins they always rose, hungrier, more determined. Other peoples spoke of endurance as philosophy. To humans, it was instinct. When the fires from the far-off galaxy swept across the border stars, when the ancient bulwarks of older powers crumbled, the question became no longer if the humans would act, but when. Admiral Elias Harron stood on the observation deck of the Resolute Dawn, watching the stars wheel slowly against the void. The flagship was positioned in high orbit above Carthenes, a joint council world that had once been a hub of art and diplomacy. Now its seas were choked with the dust of refugees, its skies filled with traffic of fleets that had no home left but here. He watched those skies in silence. The air inside the chamber was thick with the scent of ozone and metal polish. His hands were clasped behind his back, calloused fingers tightening reflexively as reports streamed through the feeds. Every hour the same litany arrived, another system burning, another line broken. Behind him the doors whispered open. He did not turn. Admiral Harron. The voice was low, resonant, and carried the faint tremor of someone who had spent too long in argument. He turned at last, studying the being who entered. A slender figure, tall, draped in flowing silver, skin like molten bronze. Counselor Asari of the Vayari, emissary of her people, her luminous eyes carrying exhaustion that mirrored his own. "You called me," Elias said. "I called you," Asari agreed. Her gaze swept the chamber, pausing on the vast window and the wounded skies beyond. Because the council is afraid, afraid of what is coming, afraid of what must be done, Elias tilted his head. And you think I am not? You are human. Asari's tone was almost accusatory, yet softened by a strange respect. Fear shapes you differently. He gave a humorless smile. Perhaps, but it shapes me nonetheless. She approached him, her long hands clasped together as though holding some fragile treasure. The council will not admit it openly, but they have no hope left in their own fleets. They have turned their eyes to yours. Elias's smile vanished. His shoulders stiffened, and when he spoke his voice was cold. You mean they want to throw humanity into the fire while they wait in safety? Asari's gaze flickered downward. If the fire is not checked, there will be no safety, not for any of us. Elias returned his eyes to the stars. In their distant light, he thought of Earth. He thought of blue oceans and green fields, of cities that still rang with laughter and industry, of the children who had no notion of how fragile their lives might be. He thought of his own daughter, somewhere far behind the lines, perhaps safe, perhaps not. Humanity had not asked to be saviors, but neither had they ever been content to die quietly. At last he spoke, and his words were quiet, but filled with iron. Then let it be known, humanity will not stand aside. If this galaxy falls, we will fall with it, but we will not fall quietly. Asari bowed her head, as though a verdict had been delivered. Then, she said softly, perhaps there is hope. The first great gathering of humanity's fleets took place above the gas giant Lumerian, whose swirling storms painted the void in colors of blood and gold. Ships of every class and generation assembled, from ancient cruisers that still bore scars of long-forgotten wars, to sleek new carriers armed with weapons no other people dared imagine. Around them hovered the vessels of allies, what few remained, their designs alien, yet their intent suddenly united. It was there that the war for the galaxy truly began. The armadas drifted above the gas giant like shards of midnight steel, their hulls reflecting storms that raged endlessly below. 1,000 banners of humanity were present, the red eagle of Earth's First Nations, the wave and flame of the Oceanic Coalition, the triple star of the outer colonies. Their histories had not always been written in unity, their rivalries had sometimes cut as deep as war. Yet here they were, gathered together, and the void hummed with the weight of what was to come. Admiral Elias Harron strode across the command bridge of the Resolute Dawn, eyes fixed on the holomap rising like a spectral sculpture above the central dais. Green motes marked humanity's fleets. Blue signified their allies, scattered and too few. The map's outer edge seethed with red, the enemy's advance, system after system blinking out as their light was devoured. Report, Elias said, voice carrying like a hammer strike. Enemy movement detected 3 sectors beyond Lumerian, replied Lieutenant Veyers, her voice tight with discipline. Scouts confirm they are driving toward the Eretion corridor. Estimated fleet size, unknown. Sensors are distorted, interference unlike anything we have previously measured. Elias studied the data, unknown fleet size, distorted readings, always the same. The invaders cloaked themselves in chaos, their movements resisting every law of strategy that mortals had come to know. What could not be seen could not be prepared for. Send word to all captains, he said. We form the line at the corridor. If the enemy wants passage to the Heartworlds, they will bleed for every star between. The officers moved with sudden urgency, but beneath their crisp obedience, Elias sensed the tremor of dread. He felt it himself, a pressure at the back of the skull, a shadow stretching over the mind. It was not only the thought of battle, it was something stranger. For all their destruction, the invaders had never been captured, never even spoken to. Not a single word, not a single gesture of parley. They fought like storms, not armies. There was no way to measure their intent, no hint of what they were beyond annihilation. Elias turned away from the holomap. Summon Counselor Asari, he said. Moments later, the Veyari emissary entered, her silver robes trailing like liquid light. She moved quietly across the bridge, her luminous eyes sweeping the vast chamber with alien grace. "You are preparing to engage them," she said, not as a question, but as an inevitability. "Yes," Elias replied. "We cannot yield the corridor. If we do, the Heartworlds will be defenseless." Asari's gaze lingered on the holomap. "You will meet them in open battle. That is the plan. Then you will learn what the rest of us have learned." Elias studied her, seeing something in her eyes that unsettled him more than all the red markers on the map. It was not fear, it was grief. "You have fought them before," he said quietly. "Yes." Her voice was scarcely more than a whisper. "And I have watched our most ancient vessels consumed like dry leaves in fire. We unleashed weapons that once shook stars, and they broke against the invaders as if they were nothing. Admiral, if you meet them openly, you will not survive." Elias's jaw tightened. He looked back to the starfield, where fleets of human design floated like fragile sparks against the void. Every ship carried lives. Every ship carried families who had chosen to fight knowing what it meant. "Then tell me," he said, "what do you suggest? To run? To scatter until there is nothing left of us but drifting wreckage? Humanity has not survived its own history by waiting meekly for the axe to fall. If this is fire, then we will meet fire with iron." For a long moment, Asari did not speak. Then slowly she lowered her gaze. "Perhaps," she said, "that is why the Council whispers your name." The Narration corridor stretched like a wound of stars through the black, a narrow band of systems connecting the outer reaches to the deep core of inhabited space. For millennia, it had been a lifeline of commerce, its worlds blooming with trade, its roots protected by treaties older than human memory. Now, it was to become a battlefield. The human fleets moved into position. Carriers unfolded wings of interceptors like flocks of steel birds. Cruisers bristled with rail batteries, missile racks, energy lances that glowed with restrained fury. Behind them loomed the heavy dreadnoughts, each one a floating fortress, shields shimmering like pale auroras across their armored skins. Across the fleet channels, silence reigned. There was no need for speeches. Every captain, every crew knew what was coming. They had heard the stories of what the invaders had done to other civilizations. They knew there would be no retreat. On the bridge of the Resolute Dawn, Elias Harren stood at the center of the dais, surrounded by his officers. His face was carved in stone, but his thoughts were fire. "Signal all ships," he said. "Form the line, prepare for contact." "Admiral," Lieutenant Veyes said, "sensors detecting." The words cut off as alarms shrieked across the deck. The void rippled. Space itself seemed to tear open, black folding into deeper black. From the rift poured shapes that defied geometry, ships that were not ships, jagged silhouettes bristling with impossible angles. Their surfaces seemed to drink light, bending perception, making the eye slide away. They came without formation, without order, and yet there was a unity to their madness, a storm given flesh. The first wave swept into the corridor, and the galaxy held its breath. "Open fire," Elias commanded. The line erupted. Rail batteries screamed metal into the void, streaks of light tearing through the dark. Missiles streaked in swarms, their trails carving white fire against the black. Lances of energy lashed out, brilliant spears piercing into the enemy vanguard. The invaders did not falter. Their ships absorbed the blows with sickening ease. Some detonated, splitting apart into clouds of burning fragments, but others surged onward, as though destruction only fed their hunger. And then they answered. Beams of black fire tore across the line, devouring shields, ripping through armor. Entire squadrons vanished in seconds. Human voices filled the comms with screams and static. Elias gripped the rail, his knuckles white. "Hold the line," he roared. "Drive them back. This is our ground." The battle became chaos. Human ships darted and wove, striking and retreating, desperate to find weakness. Dreadnoughts stood like mountains in a storm, absorbing blow after blow, returning fire with relentless fury. Carriers unleashed wave after wave of interceptors, their pilots flying into hell without hesitation. Still, the invaders pressed on, endless, merciless. Elias' eyes burned as he watched the holomap flicker with loss after loss. But beneath the despair, something stirred, something deeper, older, carved into the marrow of humanity, a defiance that had seen them through every age of fire. The invaders could not be reasoned with. They could not be bargained with. They had never known mercy, but neither had they ever met humanity. And humanity did not yield. The void boiled with fire. Humanity's fleets struck in disciplined waves, each squadron surging forward, unleashing volleys, then veering back behind the cover of dreadnoughts. Yet for every enemy vessel that was shattered, 3 more emerged from the rift. They moved with an alien rhythm, not random, but something stranger, a pattern no human strategist could predict, as if the invaders flowed with the pulse of some hidden storm. On the resolute Dawn's bridge, Admiral Elias Harron's voice cut through the chaos. "Third carrier wing, collapse your formation. Guard the right flank, Dreadnought Hammer of Syndril, redirect fire to coordinates Delta 7. Cut them off before they pierce the center." Commands snapped across channels, carried to captains and crews who obeyed with grim precision. Where order threatened to crumble, Elias' voice wove it back together. The human line bent, shuddered, but it did not break. For every scream of dying vessels, for every flare of annihilated lives, humanity's fury only burned brighter. A cluster of enemy ships, jagged and angular, broke through the forward arc, racing toward the heart of the formation. Their hulls shimmered with a black heat that swallowed incoming fire. "Target those vessels," Elias thundered. The resolute Dawn and 3 sister cruisers swung their lances in unison. Streams of radiant energy crossed the void, converging on the intruders. Shields rippled, collapsed, and one of the alien vessels erupted in a silent blossom of flame. The others kept coming. They unleashed beams that looked less like light than like the tearing of existence itself. One human cruiser split down the middle, its halves tumbling apart, spilling fire and bodies into the abyss. Another ship was swallowed whole, its screams cut short as it imploded into dust. "Forward batteries, full spread," Elias commanded. The resolute Dawn unleashed a storm of kinetic fire, 1,000 tungsten rods hurled at near-relativistic speed. They struck the remaining enemy vessels like meteors, ripping them open. Their black heat guttered, and for the first time the human line surged forward with a roar. Cheers erupted across comms. For a heartbeat, hope pierced the dark. Then the rift widened. From its depths emerged something vast, larger than any vessel yet seen, larger, perhaps, than anything that had ever moved between stars. It blotted constellations from view, its surface writhing with shifting plates that looked like the armor of some impossible beast. A hush fell across the bridge. Officers stared, pale, hands frozen on their controls. Even Elias felt his breath catch, his heart lurch as if his body itself sought to flee. The great ship's arrival was silent, but its presence was thunder. "God help us," whispered Lieutenant Veyers. Elias did not whisper. He slammed his fist against the rail. "All ships, converge fire on the behemoth. Do not let it reach the line." The galaxy lit with fury. Dreadnoughts turned every cannon, carriers emptied their bays, cruisers spat energy and steel. The void blazed with torrents of fire converging on the vast intruder, and it kept coming. Shields rippled across its body like tides. Impacts that would have split moons burst against its hull and left only shallow scars. It plowed through the storm, unrelenting, a mountain of black steel carried on a river of night. Then it answered. A single beam erupted from its core, a beam not of light but of void, a lance of unmaking. It struck a human dreadnought broadside. The ship, 3 kilometers of armored steel, vanished in an instant, reduced to nothing but a scattering of incandescent fragments. Silence fell on the comms. Then came the cries. "Admiral, the Iron Valor is gone." They cut through the center, shields collapsing across the forward arc. The line wavered. For the first time, it truly wavered. Elias' voice rose above the panic, hard as iron. "Hold fast, every ship, lock onto that monster's core. If we die here, we die breaking its damned spine." He turned to Asari, who stood silent at the rear of the bridge, her luminous eyes wide with horror. "You said we could not face them. Tell me now, do they have a weakness?" Her voice trembled. "We never found one. Then we will make one." He slammed his hand down. Signal resolute dawn. Prepare the spinal lance. The crew froze. Lieutenant Veyes turned, eyes wide. Admiral, the spinal lance is untested at this range. If the containment fails, it will not fail, Elias snapped. We fire now or the line breaks. Charge it. The decks rumbled as power conduits roared to life. Deep in the heart of the ship, energy capacitors drank in the fury of stars, channeling it into a single colossal weapon. The resolute dawn tilted, aligning its prow directly at the advancing behemoth. Charge at 90%, Veyes reported, her voice taut. Steady, Elias murmured. His hands gripped the rail so tightly his knuckles bled. Steady, the enemy Leviathan drew closer, eclipsing everything, its void beam tearing through ship after ship. It was death-given form, and it was coming for them. 100%, Veyes said. Elias' eyes blazed. Fire, the resolute dawn unleashed its fury. From its prow erupted a lance of energy brighter than suns, a focused torrent that carved through the void with unstoppable wrath. It struck the Leviathan dead center. For an instant, nothing. Then the monster screamed. The sound did not pass through ears. It struck through the soul, a psychic wail that tore into every mind across the battlefield. Crew staggered, clutching their skulls, eyes bleeding, hearts hammering in terror. And yet the Leviathan reeled. Its shields flared, cracked, shattered. Armor split. The beam burned through, cutting deep into its core. And then it detonated. The explosion lit the corridor like dawn. Shards of alien steel spiraled outward, colliding with their lesser ships, shredding them in waves. A shockwave hurled human vessels tumbling, flames streaming from broken hulls. On the bridge of the resolute dawn, officers raised their heads, gasping in disbelief. "It's down," whispered Veyes. "By the stars, we killed it." The cheers that followed shook the comms, raw and desperate. Humanity had struck a god from the sky. For the first time in all the war, the invaders had bled. Elias did not cheer. He stared into the void at the fragments still drifting, his expression hard. "They are not finished," he said, and he was right. The rift pulsed again. More ships poured forth, endless, unstoppable, but something had changed. They no longer surged forward without hesitation. They hesitated, slowed, as if feeling the wound of their slain behemoth. Humanity had shown them something they had never known, resistance that could not be erased in an instant. The battle raged on through the long hours. By the time the rift finally closed, thousands of human ships were gone, entire squadrons erased. Yet the line still held. The corridor still belonged to them. And across the galaxy, the message spread like wildfire. The humans had faced the invaders. The humans had stood. And the humans had won. Thus ended the first battle of the Narration corridor. It was not victory, not truly. The cost was immeasurable, the enemy unbroken, their numbers still beyond comprehension. Yet from that day forward, the galaxy whispered a new word, a word carried with awe and with hope: humanity. The first shadows had fallen, but in the darkness, a spark had been lit. The wreckage of the battle drifted for weeks, a graveyard of steel and bone suspended in the quiet dark. Broken hulks of human ships lay twisted alongside the shattered remnants of their enemies, a mingling of death that marked the first true stand against the invaders. Their fragments burned faintly as they fell into the corridor's stars, streaking the void with trails of light like silent funerals. The survivors returned to Carthanes. Their ships limped into orbit, blackened, torn, bleeding atmosphere from wounded hulls. Whole squadrons were missing. The fleet had been halved, but it had not been broken. For the first time since the invasion began, the galaxy dared to believe. The Grand Council assembled in the Hall of Many Voices, a chamber so vast it could house the tallest human city within its walls. Its ceiling shimmered with a projection of the stars, each constellation rendered in impossible clarity, so that delegates might speak beneath the reminder of what they sought to preserve. Representatives of dozens of peoples filled the tiers, their bodies as varied as the worlds they came from: serpentine beings coiled on crystal plinths, avians perched on metallic frames, the crystalline Veyari gleaming faintly beneath the starlight. And scattered among them, smaller in number but burning with presence, were the humans. Admiral Elias Harron stood at the central dais, the weight of every gaze heavy upon him. His uniform was scorched, his body weary, but his eyes were iron. The hall murmured with voices until Councillor Asari raised her hand. The chamber fell into silence. "Delegates," she said, her voice carrying through the air as though woven with music, "we are gathered not to mourn, but to acknowledge what has been done. The invaders came to the Narration corridor as they came to every other front. Yet this time they were met, and for the first time they were driven back." A wave of low voices rippled through the chamber. Elias said nothing. Asari gestured toward him. The humans led this defense. They endured what others could not, and they struck down a Leviathan. Now the voices rose, swelling into an uproar. Some rang with disbelief, others with awe, still others with anger. "Impossible," hissed a delegate from the Tehran, his mechanical body whirring. "No force in our archives speaks of such a feat." "One Leviathan destroyed does not mean victory, yet it means they can bleed," countered an avian delegate, feathers flaring gold. "And if they can bleed, they can die." Others shouted for caution, for retreat, for alliance, for surrender. The hall threatened to dissolve into chaos. Elias raised his voice, and though it lacked the otherworldly resonance of the alien delegates, it cut through the uproar like a blade. "Enough." The chamber stilled. He stood tall, his gaze sweeping over the tiers. "You want to know if humanity can destroy them? We can, we did, but do not mistake this for triumph. At Narration, we lost more than half our fleet. Half. Every one of those men and women fought to the last, and they will not return to their families. If you call that victory, then you are fools." Silence spread, heavy as stone. "But hear me well," Elias continued. "If we had not stood, the corridor would be gone, the heartworlds would be exposed, everything you treasure would already be ash. We paid in blood, and we held the line. That is what humanity has given you." He leaned forward, hands gripping the edge of the dais. His voice dropped, dark and sharp. "We will keep fighting, with or without you, but if you wish to survive, if you wish to save not only your worlds but your children's children, then you must stop cowering behind councils and hesitation. You must join us. The enemy cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be bargained with. They can only be fought, and if they are to be defeated, it will take all of us." For a long moment, silence reigned, then slowly one voice rose. "I will stand," said the avian delegate, spreading her golden wings. "Then so will I," murmured another, a serpentine form coiling tighter with resolve. One by one, voices joined, hesitant, then firm. Not all, some still held back, fearful, doubting, but more than had ever spoken before. Humanity's fire was spreading. At the dais, Elias closed his eyes briefly. He did not smile. He felt only the burden deepen, the fire grow heavier on his shoulders. Humanity had not sought leadership, but it had found them. In the months that followed, the Narration corridor became a forge. Shipyards rose from its moons and asteroids, belching sparks and steel. Wounded vessels limped in to be rebuilt, while new hulls rolled from dry docks faster than ever before. Humans taught their allies to fight with their ferocity, to strike with speed, to bend but never break. In return, humanity learned as well. They absorbed alien sciences, technologies long hoarded, weapons once forbidden. New warforms were born, hybrids of human daring and alien genius. Carriers equipped with Vayari shield crystals, dreadnoughts armed with Tehran entropy cannons, interceptors winged with avian maneuver drives. For the first time, the galaxy did not merely endure. It prepared, yet war was not only forged in steel. Far from the shipyards, deep within a quiet station orbiting a barren world, a young pilot named Kara Lumia knelt in silence before a memorial wall. Her squadron had been 20 strong when the battle began. She was the only one who had returned. The wall was etched with names, glowing faintly in soft light. She traced each one with her fingers, lips moving soundlessly. When at last she rose, her eyes were red but her jaw was set. She turned from the wall, walking with slow steps back to the hangars. There her craft waited, scarred and patched, yet alive. She laid her hand on its wing. "They will pay," she whispered, And in that vow, whispered in the solitude of grief, was the same fire that had carried her kind through every trial of history. Admiral Elias Harren stood once more on the resolute Dawn's bridge, watching the growing fleets assemble in the void. This time, they were not only human. Alien ships floated beside his own, banners of many peoples shining together. It was only a beginning. The enemy would return. They would return in greater force than ever before. But when they came, they would not face one fleet, one world, one species. They would face a galaxy aflame. Elias' eyes hardened. He spoke quietly as though to himself, though the crew heard and felt his words. We held the line, now we take the fight to them. And with that vow, humanity's role changed forever. The Coalition's fleets assembled like storm clouds above Lumerian. Where once only human banners had flown, now the skies swelled with vessels of every design. Crystal-hulled Vayari ships glittered beside the sharp geometry of Tiran warforms. Avian interceptors, sleek and feathered, darted between human carriers. Other races, long thought too fragile or too aloof for war, now bore their arms with grim resolve. At the heart of it all, humanity's dreadnoughts loomed like mountains of steel, the anchors around which the Alliance formed. It was not unity born of trust. It was unity born of fire. The first campaign of the new coalition targeted the outer reach, where the invaders had established forward strongholds. These were not bases as other peoples built them, no orderly stations, no industrial colonies. The enemy reshaped entire planets into pits of black metal, crusting their surfaces with crawling forges that breathed smoke into the void. Where oceans had once rolled, furnaces now boiled. Where forests had stretched, pits gaped wide. Scouts who had dared approach whispered of screams that carried across comms, though no voices transmitted. Some returned bleeding from ears and eyes, minds broken by visions of shapes that should not exist. Others never returned at all, yet it was to these places the coalition struck. The fleet emerged from Jump near the ravaged world of Carthros Prime. Once, it had been a lush ocean planet, its surface a dance of silver seas and green archipelagos. Now it lay cloaked in black. Its waters boiled with industrial scum. Its islands were cracked open, spilling magma into vast machinery that gnawed and forged without end. On the bridge of the resolute Dawn, Admiral Elias Harren watched as the world filled the viewscreen. This, he said quietly, was once a home. Beside him, Counselor Asari's luminous eyes dimmed. If the invaders win, every world will look the same. Elias's gaze hardened. Then let this be the first we take back. He turned to his crew, signal the fleet, commence the assault. The battle that followed was unlike Eretion. There, humanity had held the line in desperation. Here, they struck with purpose. Human carriers unleashed wings of interceptors, darting through the void like angry sparks. Avian craft flew alongside them, weaving patterns of impossible agility, their talons raking through enemy hulls. Tiran warforms, bristling with entropy cannons, advanced in disciplined formations, their weapons unraveling the enemy's strange geometry. Vayari ships pulsed with radiant light, their crystalline hulls refracting fire into lances that pierced black shields. And through it all, humanity's dreadnoughts advanced, shields blazing, guns roaring. The invaders fought as ever, a storm of jagged vessels boiling from the planet's surface. They swarmed without fear, without hesitation, without end. But this time, the coalition's fury met them blow for blow. Cara Lumia, her fighter patched and repainted with the names of her fallen squadron, flew at the vanguard. Her hands were steady on the controls, her eyes hard. She had no illusions. Every second she lived was borrowed, but she would spend that time dearly. She weaved through enemy fire, missiles streaking from her wings, railguns hammering. One alien craft, black and angular, exploded beneath her assault. She rolled away, dodging beams of void that tore past her, then dove again. Her comms filled with shouts and screams, but beneath it all, a rising chorus of defiance. We've got them, push the flank, they're breaking. For the first time, Kara believed it. Hours into the battle, the skies above Carthros Prime blazed with wreckage. The coalition fleets pressed closer, their guns pounding into the forges below. Entire continents cracked apart, fire spilling into the seas. The planet shook beneath the bombardment, its black crust fracturing under relentless assault. At last, the invaders faltered. Their swarms thinned, their forges stuttered, and as the coalition poured its fire into the heart of the world, the black machinery tore itself apart in a cataclysm that lit the heavens. When the smoke cleared, Carthros Prime was a ruin, but a liberated ruin. The forges were gone, the enemy's foothold had been burned away, and across the fleet cheers erupted. The galaxy reeled at the news. For the first time, the invaders had been pushed back not by desperation, but by conquest. A world had been retaken. The coalition was not merely surviving, it was winning. But with victory came new burdens. In the council chambers of Carthanes, voices clashed louder than ever. "You humans are reckless," spat a Tiran delegate, his machine body's lenses whirring angrily. "You burn worlds to cinders to claim victory. Is this salvation, or is it another kind of annihilation?" "We do what must be done," Elias replied coldly. "Would you prefer Carthros Prime remained a forge for the enemy? We prefer survival that does not consume everything in its path. Then you have not yet learned what war demands." The chamber erupted in argument. Some accused humanity of barbarism. Others praised their resolve. The fragile unity that had formed after erection now strained beneath the weight of differing visions. Councillor Asari watched in silence, her luminous gaze fixed on Elias. She saw not only the strength in him, but the danger. Humanity's fire could save the galaxy, but fire could also consume. Far from the councils, in the wreckage of Carthros Prime, Cara Lumia walked among the ruins. She had been ordered planetside with her squadron to secure the shattered forges. The air was acrid, the seas choked with black sludge. The ground throbbed faintly as though the world itself still bled. Among the wreckage she found something that froze her heart. It was not machinery, not wreckage. It was a body, not alien, human. A prisoner, skeletal and broken, wrapped in chains of black metal. Around it lay others, too many to count. Men, women, children, not of the coalition but of conquered colonies. The invaders had not simply destroyed, they had taken. Kara staggered back, bile rising in her throat. The screams the scouts had spoken of, the whispers that haunted the comms, they were not illusions. They were the voices of the enslaved, echoing through the machinery of the forges. Her comm crackled. "Lumia, report." She swallowed hard, forcing her voice steady. "Sir, you need to see this." And with those words, the war changed again. News of the captives spread like wildfire. No longer could the invaders be seen as faceless annihilators. They were something worse. They destroyed, yes, but they also harvested. The galaxy trembled with horror, and humanity's fire blazed brighter still. For now, it was not only survival that drove them, it was vengeance. The discovery at Carthros Prime spread like fire through the stars. What had once been whispered dread became undeniable truth. The invaders did not merely kill, they harvested. Across the galaxy, grief turned to fury. Civilizations that had debated retreat now clamored for war. Voices that had doubted humanity's resolve now demanded to learn their ways. For the first time in memory, the galaxy did not wait for the storm to come to it. It chose to march into the storm. The coalition's first great offensive took aim at the Nither Expanse, a region of fractured systems that the invaders had seized in their earliest waves. From there, their swarms poured into the heart of inhabited space. If the expanse could be reclaimed, the enemy's advance would falter. The coalition fleet numbered in the tens of thousands, the greatest armada ever assembled. Ships of every people sailed together, their banners reflecting in the cold light of alien suns. At the center, as always, flew the dreadnoughts of humanity, and among them the resolute Dawn. On its bridge, Admiral Elias Harron studied the holomap. Red filled the expanse like a spreading infection. The enemy had fortified it heavily, forging dozens of captured worlds into strongholds. He turned to his officers. "We will not take this quickly, we will not take this cleanly, but we will take it." Sector by sector, world by world, His voice hardened. We drive into the heart and we burn it out. The first clash came above the world of Thynra, once a jewel of icy oceans and glittering spires. Now its seas boiled black, its surface latticed with alien structures that pulsed with malignant light. The coalition struck in overwhelming force. Carriers unleashed storms of fighters. Cruisers fired barrages that lit the void. Vayari ships focused their crystalline beams into spears of pure light that shattered enemy shields. Tiran entropy cannons unraveled matter, tearing ships apart like sand. And still the enemy swarmed. They poured from the planet's surface in countless numbers, their jagged vessels clawing through the void, heedless of loss. Their void beams carved ships into ash, their twisted hulls rammed through formations like knives. But humanity did not yield. Dreadnoughts plowed through the storm, guns blazing, shields burning under the assault. Their captains fought with the grim resolve of those who had already buried half their kin. Cara Lumia flew at the forefront again, weaving between blasts of void fire, her squadron screaming vengeance across the comms. She had painted her fighter's hull with the names of every prisoner found at Carthros, each one a vow. She darted into the enemy swarms, her missiles carving a path, her railguns spitting death. Around her, allied interceptors followed her lead, weaving human tactics into their own maneuvers. Together, they fought not as scattered species, but as a single storm. Hours of battle left the skies above Thynra choked with wreckage. At last, the enemy faltered. Coalition warships pierced the planet's crust with bombardments, ripping apart the black machinery. The surface erupted in fire, tearing the invaders' stronghold apart. Thynra was liberated, but what lay beneath chilled the soul. Beneath the shattered crust, the coalition found vast caverns lined with cages. Within them, thousands of captives huddled, humans and aliens alike, emaciated, broken, their eyes wide with terror. Some had survived. Others had been consumed by experiments beyond comprehension. The prisoners spoke of nightmares, of voices in the dark, of a presence that entered their dreams, whispering promises and threats, draining them of will until they were hollow shells. The forges feed on more than bodies, one prisoner whispered, clutching Elia's sleeve with trembling fingers. They feed on the soul. Elias's jaw clenched as he listened. Rage burned in his chest, hot and consuming. Humanity had known cruelty, had inflicted it upon itself. But this was beyond cruelty. This was desecration. He stood before the Council of Captains aboard the Resolute Dawn. We are not fighting an enemy who wants our worlds, or our resources, or our surrender. We are fighting an enemy who wants us. Our lives, our minds, our very essence, and if they are not stopped, there will be nothing left of any of us but husks. His voice thundered across the chamber. So we will not stop, not until every forge is broken, every prisoner freed, every last one of these monsters burned from the stars. The captains rose in answer, their voices a roar, yet not all were united. In the council halls of Carthanes, cracks deepened. You humans drive us into slaughter, accused a delegate of the Vayari. Every world we take costs fleets' lives more than we can endure. At this pace, we will bleed ourselves dry. Better to bleed in battle than in chains, Elias retorted. Better to endure than to burn everything we touch, the Vayari snapped back. Others echoed the doubts. Was humanity saving the galaxy or consuming it in their own fire? Was their defiance salvation or damnation? Counselor Asari watched in silence, torn. She had seen humanity's fire, had felt its power. She knew without it the galaxy would already be ash. But she also feared where that fire might lead. For fire could warm and fire could save, but fire could also devour. Weeks later, deep in the Nithar expanse, Cara Lumia's squadron intercepted a strange vessel fleeing a shattered forge world. It was not wholly alien. Parts of its hull were human. Its engines bore markings from long-lost colonies. When they forced it to surrender and boarded, they found what should not have been possible. Humans, not prisoners, not slaves, but collaborators. They had bent their knees to the invaders, wearing armor of black steel, their eyes dark with something unnatural. They fought like demons, hurling themselves at Kara's team with screams that were not wholly their own. When it was over, blood pooled on the alien deck. Kara stood over the bodies, chest heaving, horror burning in her eyes. "Sir," she whispered into her comm, "they're turning us. They're changing us." And with that revelation, the war's shadow deepened. For the enemy was not only without, the enemy was within. The war had changed. The enemy no longer appeared as faceless annihilators. They were corruptors, desecrators, thieves of flesh and will. Every battle now carried with it the fear that fallen soldiers might not truly be lost, but reborn as weapons against their kin. This fear spread through the coalition like poison. In the council chambers aboard the station Athery's spire, voices clashed in bitter waves. "They have turned your people against us," hissed the Vayari delegate, her crystalline form vibrating with unease. "We cannot risk their presence at the front. Humanity carries within it the seed of corruption." "You dare?" Elia's voice rang like iron. It was humans who first stood against them when all others cowered. It was humans who bled to hold Eretion, who led the charge at Carthros and Thynra. "Perhaps," the Tiran mechanist intoned in its grinding voice, "but fact remains. The first turned soldiers were human. The infection begins with you. If it spreads—" Elias's hand tightened on the edge of the table until his knuckles whitened. "Then we cut it out. We burn it from ourselves before we let it consume us. But do not think to chain humanity while we fight for your survival." The chamber fell into uproar, delegations rising, shouting, pointing. Only Councillor Asari remained still, her luminous eyes never leaving Elia's. She saw the fire in him, blazing brighter with every slight, every accusation. A fire that could save. A fire that could destroy. Far from the councils, Cara Lumia and her squadron found themselves patrolling the dark edges of the expanse. It was there, among drifting wreckage fields, that they encountered the first sign of betrayal. A coalition conv, laden with supplies, had gone silent. When Kara's squadron approached, they found the ships adrift, their hulls scarred, their lights extinguished. They boarded the lead vessel. Inside, they found no battle scars, no breach, no corpses, only absence. Every crewman, every officer gone. On the walls, scrawled in a substance that shimmered black under their lamps, were words in dozens of languages. Words not written by human or alien hand, but by something deeper. "The fire belongs to us. You will burn in our dawn." Kara's skin crawled as she read. Her comm crackled with whispers that did not belong to her squadmates, nor to any living voice. She ripped the helmet from her head, gasping. Behind her, one of her wingmen screamed. He collapsed, clutching his skull, eyes rolling white. When he looked up again, it was not his voice that spoke. "They are already inside you." Blasters flared. The body fell still. Silence descended, heavy as a tomb. The council dismissed Kara's report as hysteria. Hallucinations born of battle trauma, some declared. Enemy trickery, nothing more. But Elias believed her. He had seen the bodies at Carthros. He had heard the screams in his dreams. And worse, he had begun to feel a shadow within himself. Sometimes, in the quiet hours aboard the Resolute Dawn, he heard whispers. Promises of victory if only he let go. Whispers that urged him to unleash his fury, to burn everything that stood in his path, enemy and ally alike. He told no one. The coalition's offensive ground forward system by system, but tension grew within its ranks. Entire squadrons vanished in the night. Ships defected, their crews later found among enemy fleets, their eyes blackened, their voices wrong. Trust began to wither. Species accused one another of collusion. Some whispered that humanity itself was compromised, that Elias Harren was but a pawn in a deeper game. The first open fracture came when the Vayari declared they would withdraw their fleets. "We will not march under human command," their high speaker announced. "Your fire is too dangerous. Already it spreads. Already it consumes." The council chamber erupted. Elias rose, his voice like a storm. "Withdraw, and you will doom not only yourselves, but every world you claim to protect. We will not be consumed by your war, then you will be consumed by theirs." For a moment, it seemed the chamber would collapse into violence. Only Asari's intercession prevented bloodshed, her voice soft, yet carrying across the tumult. If we break now, the invaders will not need to divide us. We will have done it for them. Hold your fire, hold your tongues. We cannot yet afford to be enemies. But the crack remained, and all knew it would only widen. Kara's squadron was sent on a deep reconnaissance into the expanse, a mission to track the path of enemy reinforcements. Days into the void, they found something that should not have been possible, a wormhole. It churned in the dark like a wound in space itself, rimmed with jagged constructs that pulsed with alien light. From it poured endless fleets, pouring into their galaxy from beyond. Through her scope, Kara saw stars not of their own galaxy, burning in alien constellations. A far-off realm, another galaxy entirely. Her blood ran cold. They are not merely invaders, she whispered. They are a tide, and this is only the beginning. Her words carried back to Elias, to Asari, to the Council, and with them came the realization that chilled the galaxy to its core. The war was not a storm that would pass. It was the edge of an ocean, and humanity stood at the shore. The wormhole hung in the void like a bleeding wound, tearing reality apart with every pulse. Around it, alien constructs spun in jagged orbit, titanic lattices of black steel, chained to shattered moons and dead asteroids. From its gaping maw poured enemy fleets in endless procession, an armada that could not be numbered. When the reconnaissance was confirmed, panic swept the Council. What had been war for survival became a war against infinity. We cannot win, one delegate cried in the spire chamber, her tendrils quivering with fear. It is not an army we face. It is a tide, unending, unstoppable. We cannot dam the sea. And yet if we flee, Elias answered, his eyes burning, the tide will follow. There is no hiding. There is no retreat. There is only standing here or falling everywhere. He rose, the fire within him visible to all. We must strike at the source, at the gate itself, tear it down or burn with it. Nothing else will suffice. The chamber erupted in outcry. Some shouted for reason, others for surrender, others for delay. But amidst the chaos, Councillor Asari rose. Her voice was calm, but carried across the din like a blade. He is right. If we do not strike the gate, this war ends not in years, not in centuries, but in the extinguishing of all stars. We must choose not whether to strike, but how. And so the greatest gamble in history was set. The plan was madness. The coalition would gather every fleet, every vessel that could bear arms, and hurl them at the wormhole in a single cataclysmic offensive. While the armada clashed, humanity's dreadnoughts, rebuilt, reforged, burning with weapons born of desperate ingenuity, would spearhead the assault on the wormhole's lattices. If the gate could be collapsed, the tide would end. If it held, the galaxy would be drowned. As the fleets gathered, Elias stood alone on the bridge of the resolute dawn. He gazed through the viewport at the endless assembly of ships, a host greater than anything the galaxy had seen, and yet even this felt small before the ocean awaiting them. The whispers returned, curling in the back of his mind. Unleash us, they murmured. Let go, burn them all. Burn until nothing resists you. He pressed his hands against the console until his nails bit into flesh. I am not yours, he told the dark. I am human, I am my own. But even as he defied it, he feared. For he felt the shadow growing stronger, not weaker, with every battle, every death. Kara Lumia's squadron flew reconnaissance ahead of the gathering fleet. The closer they drew to the wormhole, the more the void itself seemed wrong. Light bent where it should not. Stars flickered like dying embers. And sometimes, when she blinked, she swore she saw shapes moving between the stars, vast, impossible, their outlines burning into her mind before vanishing. Her wingmen spoke less with every passing day. Some whispered to themselves, others grew silent altogether. When one finally turned his blaster on his own temple mid-flight, the squadron's comms were filled with static whispers that none dared repeat. Kara carried his body home. She painted his name on her fighter's hull below the others. The list grew long, too long. On the eve of the assault, the coalition fleets encircled the dark moor. Their engines lit the void like a new constellation, their banners rippling in the reflected glow. Songs were sung, vows spoken, prayers whispered. For many, this was to be their last dawn. Elias walked the decks of the Resolute Dawn, speaking with the crew. He clasped hands, offered words of steel, met each gaze as if memorizing it. When he returned to his chamber, Asari awaited him. "You burn yourself hollow," she said softly. "Better I burn," Elias replied, "than they, perhaps, but fire without control consumes not only the foe." For a long moment, silence lay between them. Then Asari placed her hand upon his arm. "Do not forget what you fight for, not only what you fight against." Her touch grounded him, if only for a heartbeat. The assault began. The Coalition's fleets surged toward the wormhole, a river of light against a storm of darkness. Alien vessels poured forth in numbers beyond comprehension, a living wall of blades and fire. The void ignited. Kara's squadron dove into the fray, railguns spitting fury, missiles streaking in brilliant arcs. Around her, fighters of every species followed, weaving in patterns no single race could have devised. They fought not as fragments, but as one. The great ships of humanity pressed forward through the heart of the enemy tide. Dreadnoughts fired until their guns glowed white, their shields buckled, their hulls aflame. Elia's commands rang clear, each order carving a path closer to the lattices binding the wormhole. The constructs loomed ahead, colossal towers of alien metal, anchored into moons shattered to rubble, their spires channeling streams of raw energy into the wound in space. They pulsed with a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat, a living thing. The first human dreadnought rammed into a lattice, detonating its core. The explosion tore through the construct, collapsing half its span. A cheer rose across the fleet, followed by a scream as the wormhole itself widened in fury, spewing forth an armada tenfold greater. The tide was endless. In the chaos, the betrayal came. The Vayari fleets, already restless, turned without warning. Half their ships broke formation, not against the enemy, but against their allies. Coalition vessels exploded in the crossfire, their crews, unprepared for friendly fire, turned deadly. On the comms, the Vayari High Speaker's voice thundered. "The humans are infected. The fire they bring is the same that feeds our enemy. Better to destroy it now than let it consume us all." Elias roared, his voice echoing across every human channel. "Hold the line, strike forward, ignore them." But the damage was done. The coalition faltered, fractured in the heat of its greatest battle. Amidst the chaos, the wormhole pulsed brighter, hungrier, as though feeding on the discord. Elias slammed his hand down on the console. "All human ships with me, we end this here and now." The Resolute Dawn and her sister dreadnoughts surged forward, spearing into the storm, guns blazing, hulls tearing. Kara's squadron cut a path through swarming interceptors, their fighters burning one by one until only a handful remained. The wormhole towered before them now, its lattices bleeding energy, its maw wide enough to swallow worlds. Within its depths, Elias saw alien stars, alien galaxies, endless legions waiting to pour through. He set his jaw. "Bring us into the heart." And the Resolute Dawn charged straight into the gate of endless night. The Resolute Dawn plunged into the storm. Fire licked its hull, enemy weapons tore at its flanks, but the ship pressed onward, engines screaming as though they shared their captain's fury. Behind it surged the last of the human dreadnoughts, battered, aflame, but unbroken. Around them, the coalition fractured. Some species fled. Others held their ground, locked in hopeless duels with the tide. And still others, poisoned by fear, turned their guns upon their supposed allies. But the humans charged on. As the Resolute Dawn neared the wormhole's lattices, the enemy gathered to block the way. Not mere warships now, but titans, constructs larger than cities, their bodies fused with writhing organic forms, their weapons powered by the raw lifeblood of suns. Each strike from their cannons shattered dreadnought armor like glass. Whole vessels vanished in single flashes. Still, humanity pushed forward, engines blazing, guns spitting fire until the void itself seemed alight. Kara's squadron flew at the vanguard, cutting paths through swarms of interceptors. Her fighter shook with damage, its hull scored black, but her hands were steady. Every missile she loosed struck true, every burst of fire a step closer to the lattice. "Captain," she called across the comms, "the path is open. Take it now before it closes." Elias's voice thundered back, "With me all ships, into the wound." And with that, the resolute Dawn speared forward, smashing through the last barricade, plunging into the blinding storm of the wormhole itself. Within the gate, there was no space, no time. Stars bent and broke. Voices whispered in tongues older than galaxies. The crew screamed as their senses stretched beyond mortal limits, their bodies pulled in directions that did not exist. But Elias held the ship steady. His will, his fury, his refusal to yield held them together when physics would not. He burned like a beacon in the abyss, dragging his vessel forward through sheer defiance. At the heart of the wormhole, they saw it. The source, not a machine. Not a fleet, a being. It loomed vast beyond comprehension, its body woven from tendrils of void light, its eyes burning with galaxies. Around it, chained in webs of energy, writhed 1,000 enslaved civilizations, their screams feeding the tide. It was a god not of creation, but of consumption, a devourer of stars, a shepherd of endless night. The crew fell to their knees, unable to breathe, unable to think. Some clawed at their own flesh, begging to be taken. Elias stood tall, his eyes blazed. The whispers in his mind roared now, no longer subtle, no longer hidden. "You are ours," the being thundered. "You are fire born of darkness. You are my child, my instrument. Surrender, and I will give you dominion over all creation. Resist, and I will unmake you as I unmake all things." For a heartbeat, Elias faltered. The promise was intoxicating. To command such power, to end the war in a single act, to burn the enemy from existence and rule the ashes. Then he heard another voice. Kara's, ragged over the comms, her fighter clinging to the resolute Dawn's flank. "Captain, whatever it takes, do not let them win. Humanity is more than fire, we are hope." Her words pierced the shadows. Elias threw back his head and roared, not with submission but defiance. "I am not your child, I am human, and humanity bows to no darkness." He seized the ship's controls with his own hands, bypassing every system, every safeguard. The resolute Dawn's core began to overload, its heart burning brighter than a star. The crew screamed for him to stop. Asari, on the comms, pleaded with him to turn back. But Elias' voice thundered across every channel, to every ship, to every soldier still alive in the fight. "Humanity was born in fire. We endure in fire. And if we must end in fire, then know this: our light will not go quietly into night. It will burn until all shadows are ash." With that, he drove the resolute Dawn directly into the heart of the abyssal being. The explosion was beyond light, beyond sound. It tore through the wormhole like a blade, unraveling its tendrils, collapsing its lattices, severing its chains. The enslaved civilizations screamed free, their bindings shattered. The being itself writhed in agony, its vast form cracking, breaking, scattering into the void. The wormhole imploded. For one terrible moment, it seemed the galaxy itself would be drawn in, consumed by the collapse. Ships were hurled aside, stars bent, reality shivered. Then, with a thunderous silence, it was gone. The tide had ended. When the survivors opened their eyes, they floated amid wreckage and ruin. Of the vast coalition fleet, a fraction remained. Entire species had vanished. Countless ships drifted lifeless, their crews gone, but the wormhole was sealed. The invaders, cut off, began to crumble without their god. Across the stars, their fleets faltered, their constructs fell, their armies dissolved into silence. The galaxy lived. Kara Lumia sat in her crippled fighter, staring at the empty space where the resolute Dawn had been. No signal, no escape pods, no trace, only silence. She whispered into the void, "You kept your promise, Captain. You burned so we could see the dawn." And for the first time since the war began, she allowed herself to weep. In the centuries to come, tales of Elias Harran spread across every world. Some called him a martyr, some called him the Dawnbringer, some whispered that he still lived, carried into the abyss, watching, waiting. But all agreed on one truth: when the galaxy stood on the brink of night, it was humanity that lit the fire, and that fire saved them all.